Hi everybody, welcome to Safe Diving. So it's that time of the, month again, where I basically go through all of your questions, comments, queries, corrections, all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff, whatever you've put down in the comment section. And I basically spend some time to elaborate on your questions. This is number 6. I'm just going to jump straight into it. So the first one comes from Stephen Clyde, and they ask, do you have any thoughts on the Scuba Pro Aladdin A2? I'm brand new to diving and looking to buy my first dive computer. It seems like a good balance of being not quite as expensive, but still having some good features like air integration. I also like how it has sport mode, so it can be used for other things like swimming. I actually got to play with the Scuba Pro A2. And it's its brother, as it were, the A1, and they're smart sort of watch-size dive computers. You've got that sort of dot matrix or semi-dot matrix screen, so it can do some really complicated stuff in the middle. As you said, it's got wireless air integration, so if you do buy a transmitter, it can talk to that, which is very nice. Another thing that it can connect to is a wireless heart rate monitor, which I believe also does skin temperature, and that goes into Scuba Pro's human factor diving, so it actually adjusts your dive profile, your decompression algorithm, based on if you're working really hard, then most likely you're going to be absorbing more gas, so it gets a bit more conservative. Whereas if you've got a nice sort of chilled out dive, you're nice and warm, everything's sort of working normally, it actually makes it a little bit not more risky, but you can stay down for longer. So they're a smart computer. They do have for swimming, it's got like lap counters. I don't really know how they work. I think you kind of set sort of how many strokes you do per lap, and then every stroke it kind of records it. You can wear it day to day. It's a smart looking computer. It's got the same kind of strap, that kind of stripy bandy strap as the M2, the previous version. I'd definitely recommend the A2 or the A1. They're just as good. Harrison I, or Harrison L, or Harrison 1, asked, notice you don't have a boot on your tank. Oh no, it's an I. Harrison, I noticed that you don't have a boot on your tank. Can you give your thoughts on tank boots in a Q&A or its own video? So on that video, none of my tanks have boots, actually. I've taken them all off, but mainly because... So the main reason why I'm not a huge fan of boots are quite handy. They mean that your tanks can stand up, but that kind of almost encourages you to stand them up, and they're really easy to push over even when you do have a boot. So there's one reason. The second reason, which is more the sort of the main reason, is I used to work at a dive centre that used to sort of service cylinders and sort of fill up cylinders, and you get these tanks coming in and they've got these boots on, but you can almost see the rust kind of sort of starting to form around the top, and especially if you look sort of underneath, they usually have a drainage hole. Tanks, because they have to be pretty snug onto the bottom of your tank, they kind of trap seawater against them, and eventually, especially where they're making contact, it makes its way underneath the paint, and then it just holds that seawater against the stainless steel, and that's where rust tends to form. So when we're like hydrostatically testing your cylinders, and even visually, we'll take the boot off, and the amount of paint that usually flecks off and then rust that comes underneath it, and that's all because the boot just kind of traps it. So I'm not adverse to boots as long as you use them properly. After you dive them, it's almost worth taking them off. They're a pain to take off, but it's worth it. Making sure everything dries out and then putting them back on. And whenever I'm storing cylinders, it's normally laid down, just because they can't fall any further from their current position. Kevin Dessaigneur asks, do you use those shorts, my Fourth Element Tech shorts, over your 3mm wetsuit, or just like this? So both, really. You can wear them over a wetsuit. It's really what they're made for, but you can wear them just by themselves as a pair of board shorts. Obviously, I normally wear something underneath like board shorts because it's a bit awkward. But yeah, the main problem with them is they're a fourth element large, and most of my stuff tends to be sort of size large, but actually they're pretty snug. You can get them over a sort of 4 and even probably even a 5mm if I tried. But yeah, you can wear them by themselves as sort of board shorts, so you've got some pockets, or you can wear them over a wetsuit. That's really what they're made for. But if you're going for the fourth element ones, just be a little bit careful about the size, because I think if I went by fourth element size chart, I'd be a medium, but even the larges are fairly snug. The problem is you kind of want them snug so that they don't just fall out as soon as you put something clunky in it. But yeah, it is worth trying them on first before actually buying them if you can. MaxTalk asks, what do you think about ditching the mechanical SPG and just having the air integrated one for recreational warm water diving? They go on to say, with no overhead environments, generally shallow depths, mostly at least buddied and often in larger groups, I've ditched mine in the aim of being more streamlined, lighter and simpler, with the caveat that one pays good regular attention to your air level, obviously. I can't see it being any problem. In the unlikely event of the integration system failing and being suddenly unable to read my air state, they're really pretty robust these days. True, then I'll just end the dive at that point. I know I've got plenty of air because I hadn't sort of got plenty of air on the last good read. Then I would have already ended the dive on wreck dive. This is a long question. No one's really pushing any limits or doing anything that's likely to be compromised by an early exit from the water. I do take a small mechanical SPG along in my boat kit bag, which could be used to save a dive if I couldn't get the integrated solution to work when kitted up before a dive. A quick hose swap and it can be quickly added into place should that happen. Not happened yet. So yeah, so what MaxTalk is basically saying is, instead of having a physical sort of SPG, submersible pressure gauge, why don't you get rid of that and just fit a wireless air transmitter? And yeah, the main reason is, as he said, it's that kind of redundancy. If the battery on my dive computer died, or if the battery in my transmitter died, or if they lose sort of connection, or if both lose, or whatever it is, then you wouldn't know that you have any gas. But if you're a prudent diver, then you're checking your gas sort of quite often. For me, I'm just quite old-fashioned, I suppose. I like having that that analog backup that can never fail. I wouldn't be objected to diving a really sort of lightweight setup. I've known a couple divers do it, and they literally have like 2 hoses coming out of their first stage. So they have one that leads to their primary, one that leads to their inflator, but it's also one of those like Scuba Pro A2s or a sort of auto air. So that's your octo, and then you just have a transmitter. So you pull out this regulator and it's got 2 hoses sticking out of it, and everyone freaks out, but actually it's got everything that you need. And yeah, if you really are sort of counting the ounces, the grams that are sort of going into your kit bag, then yeah, there's nothing really wrong with it. If anything, you're reducing the number of failure points. But yeah, I'll always dive with a simple brass sort of SPG, just because I like that sort of petrol gauge kind of thing. It's my sort of visual thing. But I do like diving air integrated. It is quite nice to be able to see air time remaining, because based on your sort of current sort of gas usage and your current depth, your air will run out in about so many minutes. But yeah, I'm not really adverse to ditching it if you do really need to sort of save every single gram. Harry Pink says, great video as always, thank you. How do you tie the bungee on your compass? My compass is not there, but it's similar to this. So this is a old dive computer. This is a Sunto Hilo 2, and it sits in a boot. You can get these all over the place for sort of different compasses, but a lot of them are actually coming with them as standard. And yeah, you just get. I normally do 2 separate bungees. So you have, I make a little X just because if one fails, then you have the second one. Whereas if you make it out of one continuous piece of bungee, if one fails, it kind of all fails. I don't really know why I make it into a crisscross. I just kind of do. Most people just do sort of parallel lines. There's no particular reason why I do do a crisscross, not that I can think of. It's just kind of the way it sort of sits on your wrist. It kind of crosses over quite neatly, but there's no real reason to it. And then the knots, nothing fancy. These are just simple, I don't know what you call it, figure of 8 knot. Yeah, that's it. Nothing overly fancy, but I do like a sort of a bungee strap instead of a proper like buckled strap, just because buckles, that you just get that extra flappy bit of material, and yeah, they just kind of get in the way. So yeah. Eric Hoffman asks the age-old question of Teric or Perdix AI. I'm really struggling to choose. The Perdix looks so convenient for dry suit diving. Yeah, they're basically the same thing. It's just one is small and watch size, so you can wear it day to day. The other one is large screen. The Teric does have a few upgrades. The main one is that it's got sort of watch functions also, but it does have that haptic feedback, so it vibrates, which is really nice because you don't get that sort of chorus of sort of sounds under the water. You can sort of have the sound on, but when something's vibrating on your wrist, it's really quite obvious. And as a day-to-day watch, it's quite nice because you can have that as a sort of silent alarm in the morning, so you don't wake your partner up. But they're both kind of the same tool. They just do it ever so slightly differently, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is just personal preference. The Teric has a beautiful screen. You can read it sort of in murky waters. It's just that the Perdix has a slightly larger screen. So whilst you might be able to see a little bit more information, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's probably not that far off actually, because on the Teric you can have 3 bits of information in the center kind of console, and then you have your depth and your no decompression and whatnot. But actually, no, you're going to be happy with either. It's just whether you want the Teric that you can kind of wear all the time, or if you want the Perdix, which has just got a larger screen. The Teric is what you call it, rechargeable, comes in a little cradle that just sort of connects to a USB, whereas the Perdix is user changeable. Just put a AA battery in. Yeah, personally I dive the Perdix just because I like a large screen dive computer, and yeah, you can pick up replacement AA batteries anywhere. Clocky Sam says, "Hi Mark." Hi Clocky Sam. I'd be interested to know where you got the plate for your DSMB from. That's what I've been looking out for a good while now. So what they're talking about is a small metal square plate. I don't have it here with me. It's it's actually a small plate that I believe is for like a side mount canister battery. I just sort of retrofitted this. It's meant for it's meant for side mount diving. I honestly can't remember where I got these from. It's the kind of thing that you just kind of collect, and I think it just ended up on my desk, and I was like, oh yeah, that looked quite handy, and it just sort of ended up in this drawer. And one day I was like, ooh, I could turn that into something useful. But yeah, so they're made for side mount diving. So I imagine that's from an X-Deep, like Stealth or something. And people do sort of sell them. A few companies come to mind, but I can't think of their name. The first one that comes is Helium. As I'm editing this, I'll put the names up somewhere so that you can see them. There are a couple places that just sell the individual components. Yeah, I'll do some digging for you, and I'll put some links down below for you. Kimon Frusios asks, I have a question. I see most tech divers have their waist buckle on the right hip. Why? I would think that from a rescue release point of view, it would be better not to thread the whole buckle through the crotch strap, as it makes it harder to undo. As a recreational diver, it makes more sense to have it on the left hip. Yeah, I think the original reason to have your buckle So on like a DIR harness, you typically have the quick release buckle. It's like your weight belt buckle coming from your left hand hip, and then rounds to the right hand side, and that's kind of where it gets sort of clamped down. And then you have the crotch strap dead center. Now the reason why the actual quick release buckle sits on the right hand hip is because you used to have, or you still have, your canister light battery on your right hand hip, and because they were quite heavy lead batteries, when you're in a sort of heads down, like horizontal position, it would naturally kind of slip forwards. So if you put that quick release buckle on the right hand hip, it keeps your battery in position, and I think that tradition has just kind of stuck. Yes, it does make more sense to have it on the left hand side for a quick release, because yeah, you undo it and then you have to slip the buckle through your crotch strap. I don't know. If anyone does sort of know any sort of obvious reason, then pop it down in the comments. But no, it's just kind of, well, that's how I was taught to do it. I was kind of told, oh, it's to keep your battery sort of in position, and I never really questioned it. Touch wood, it's never been an issue for me. But hey, maybe there is another more legitimate reason. Let us know in the comments below. Chris Weemays, I'm a green diver. Oh, that's fine. So maybe a stupid question. There are no stupid questions. Why two setups? So he's talking about me having a setup for my twins and a setup for my sort of singles and travel. If your travel setup is okay, why chance it why change it? Sorry, when you are diving at home. So the main reason why is that I can, because I've chosen this specialty. It's a little bit easier for me, but for sort of most divers, I can recognize that it makes more sense to have a general sort of Goldilocks type of sort of setup that can do sort of lightweight travel and can sort of dive at home. So I do understand that. For me as a professional diver, I just get really nerdy with it basically. So yeah, my main focus was in building my twin set, so I went down the kind of the steel kind of route with the backplates, and then sort of when I sort of thought about like traveling, I was like, well, actually, you know what, let's build a lightweight travel kind of setup. So I've got that for my twins, but yeah, for sort of lightweight travel, so I went, right, carbon fiber or sort of aluminium. So I know I ended up with aluminium. The harness was easy, and then the bladder was quite easy as well. I just went for kind of the smallest thing because I wanted it small and lightweight. So yeah, so I just wanted, again, I go back to that sort of car analogy. You can have this like general day-to-day car that kind of does everything, but it doesn't really do like track racing amazingly, or it doesn't do off-road really well, whereas I decided to go, well, screw it, I'm going to have two. So I might do one that does off-road really well, and one that does so like track days really well as well. So that's kind of it. There's no other reason other than kind of I can. Elmo from Sesame Street writes in, I love your work, by the way, Elmo. I grew up sort of watching your TV programs. Okay, so what's the opinion on, or what's your opinion of the travel light backplates? So there are another option. I just mentioned my my lightweight travel setup, and I went for aluminium instead of carbon fiber. There is a third option, which is really light, ultra light sort of backplates, and to call them a plate is kind of false because they're completely flexible. So they kind of sit in that middle ground between recreational setups and sort of technical backplates, and they are great for travel because they're very light, and they're very flexible, so you can pack them down really easily. They're fine if weight is your primary goal, but you can't, there's no rigidity to them whatsoever, so you can never bolt a pair of twins onto them. Your single tank is going to kind of rock around a little bit, and that's the main point of sort of backplates, because everything's bolted together. It's a bit more solid and it kind of moves with you. So it kind of sits in that sort of grey area between recreational setups with that kind of flexibility, but it does sit in the kind of nice side in that you can sort of pick and customize your harness. So if you're thinking of transitioning from sort of recreational to a bit more of a sort of technical setup, yeah, you can sort of opt for it, but only if you are just traveling constantly. Although even that, if you're traveling for diving and you are diving like constantly, you might as well just go with aluminium because it's so much stronger, because that fabric eventually is just going to wear out. So yeah, you might as well just go for a sheet of metal. George M. Vasilides asks, hey Mark, hi. How long are your hoses? That's a very personal question. And what backplate wing setup do you recommend? So my hoses, my primary is on 2.1 meter long hose. I think that's just a standard MeFlex hose. Also, pop down in the questions whether you call it MeFlex or MyFlex, because I've always grown up calling it MyFlex because that's kind of how it's spelt. But if you call up the UK distributor, it's good morning MeFlex hoses, and I was like, okay. But yeah, my primary is on 2.1 meter. My octo, my alternate, that sits on, I think it's like a 55, maybe 60 something centimeter. It's a little bit shorter than a standard sort of hose. My pressure gauge is on like a 70, I don't know, I'd have to measure them. My my dry suit hose is usually on like a 90, just so I have a bit more sort of flex. My BCD hose, it depends on the BCD. I just use the one that comes with it. On my twins, it's usually a bit shorter. On my single, it's a bit longer, and that's about it. What backplate and wing setup do you recommend? It depends on you, basically, where you're diving. If you're diving on singles or twins, if you want something really, really strong or really, really light, it's a prescriptive thing. There's no one just buy this. It's the whole point of it is that you kind of pick and choose kind of what suits you best. And what suits me might be different from what suits someone else. So it will be irresponsible of me to just say, oh, just buy the XD NX Zen, even though I do that a lot because it's a lovely setup. But no, if you want to dive twins, then no, I wouldn't go for a Zen. I'd go for something slightly different. But yeah, it's prescriptive, so I need to know a lot more to recommend a backplate and wing setup. Warren Halstead asks, I didn't see on your gear list in the description, but is that a gear Harper loop or the Mares XR-SF2? And did A-Gear ever resolve the fact that it looks a lot like the Mares copied their design? So this was actually on my lightweight setup, which is on my Mares backplate. So that's actually a Mares XR-SF2, the copy as it were. On my twin setup, that's got a gear Harper loop. The only reason why I got the Mares one, the only real difference is that the A-Gear Harper, if that's the kind of flat section of it, the loop coming out of it, the loop is sort of, it cambers off to one side, which is quite nice sort of around your hip, whereas the Mares one is actually straight 90 degrees. But other than that, it is super hard to find A-Gear Harper loops. I think you can buy them directly from their website, but there's like no price on it. It's like 0 krona. So I don't really know what is going on with them. They don't really have a lot of distributors, especially internationally. So they kind of need to up their game, as it were. The Mares XR version is much easier to sort of get hold of, and that's the one that's fitted to my lightweight travel harness. The kind of the A-Gear Mares sort of antagonistic relationship. So from what I know, and I could be wrong, this is just hearsay and sort of from what I've sort of gathered, it was years and years ago at some kind of dive show. Mares had like all of their sort of wares out on a table, and they had this prototype of the SF2 just kind of there. They weren't really doing a whole song and a dance about it. They weren't sort of, oh, look at our new amazing thing. It was just kind of, oh, the techie guys, they made this, and it was there with a bunch of their other sort of hardware. And this guy like turns up and he's shouting and all this kind of kicking up a fuss, sort of claiming that it's copyrighted or patented or whatever it was, and yeah, so Mara's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. So they took it off the stand. They sort of halted production, did all this kind of stuff, and they contacted A-Gear and just said, oh, okay, could you sort of provide copies of your patents or anything? I don't really know the technical side of it, and they never really did. I think they kept showing them something, but the Mara's legal team were like, well, this isn't, I don't know, binding or official enough or whatever it is. So they went through like years of this, and it got to the point of like, well, no, Mara's have done their like due diligence, as it were, and they're like, well, unless you can sort of provide something, then yeah, we're just going to continue production. And obviously, yeah, they just continued production. As far as I'm aware, it's all above board. If A-Gear had, I don't know, patented it or done something, all it really sounds like is that they didn't get a certain bit of paperwork. Again, I could be wrong, but yeah, it never looks nice. A company as large as Mara's and a company as small as sort of A-Gear, but it happens all over, in all sorts of different industries. It definitely happens in the scuba diving industry. You'll see one feature on a regulator or a dive computer, and then magically in the next season, it's kind of disseminated into sort of other brands. So it's not unusual. It just looks kind of bad. You've got this big bad sort of Mara's copying the design of this sort of little company, but as far as I'm aware, it's all kind of above board. I could be wrong. Don't know. Let me know down in the comments below. And following on from that, Oma Kicks asks, I can't get hold of the A-Gear. Will SF2 fit on the Apex WTX 18 backplates? So it's just the WTX backplates. 18 is the wing, I believe. But yeah, so that the SF2, it's basically made to fit in the 2-inch wide, or it's just over 2-inch wide, kind of slot on the back of the backplate. So it should fit on any sort of metal backplates because they're made to fit 2-inch straps. So yeah, it should be fine. Another question from Oma Kicks, do you wear a weight belt and lead for this setup? So that's in my sort of lightweight travel setup, my single cylinder. Can't see clearly in the video. So yes, I just wear a standard weight belt, nothing fancy, just a sort of a webbing weight belt, and they just block leads that sort of comes on the boat. Nothing fancy. I don't really like separate pouches and pockets and all that kind of stuff, just because they end up breaking and getting lost, whereas you can't really break a piece of webbing and a metal sort of quick release buckle, and if you lose the lead, it's not really yours. Yeah, depending on sort of what I'm wearing and what the sort of salinity is, it's like 2 kilos of lead, and that's kind of all I really need. Sometimes I dive with a bit more, especially at the beginning of the trip, just so I can donate to someone else. But yeah, nothing fancy, just a standard weight belt. Tamara Damayanti asks, now I'm considering to use a backplate, good, but still not sure to get myself a hybrid one like the Scuba Pro Hydros Pro or Halcyon Carbon Fiber. Any advice? Much appreciated. So the Hydros Pro is more of a recreational BCD, so whilst it does have similar features of a sort of backplate and harness wing setup, it sits in the like recreational side of things for me, because it's all one complete unit, whereas with the sort of the Halcyon, the carbon fiber backplate, you get the backplate and then you get the separate harness and you fit that to that. It doesn't necessarily have to be Halcyon, it could be any other brands or most other brands, and then you get the wing, the bladder, and then you sort of bolt it all together. Whereas the Hydros Pro is the Hydros Pro. If you need to replace a part of it, you have to get a replacement Hydros Pro sort of part for it. If you're looking at the carbon fiber, then by the sounds of it, you're looking for something lightweight. The Hydros Pro isn't as lightweight as you kind of imagine it is, because it's made out of that sort of monoprene material as their fins. It's actually a fairly heavy BCD just to hold in your hands. It is good for travel because after the dive, it dries almost instantaneously, and it packs away pretty small. But if you are looking to move into sort of a backplate setup, then I'd go like full force into that sort of backplate setup. So yeah, either the carbon fiber or an aluminium backplate for travel, and then sort of just take the dip and just sort of go fully into your sort of backplate and harness setup. Drew Bursey asks, what do you think about dive right regulators? I haven't really seen them or seen that many people with them. No, they're not, especially in this country or in my country in the United Kingdom, they're not really known for their regulators. You get a few brands like that. So Tusa, especially in this country, they're known for their masks, their fins and their snorkels and their kind of accessories. They also make regulators. They're perfectly fine. It's not really what that brand is known for, if you know what I mean. So with Dive Right, it's more kind of the accessories and the BCDs, but their regulators, I'm sure they're fine. I've played about with a few of them. It's just they're kind of the design and their finish has never really kind of wowed me into, oh, I kind of want to know more about this. They feel a little bit plasticky for me. I'm sure they're perfectly fine. I know a lot of people do use them and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just, there are so many brands. If there were 3 brands, it would make life a lot easier, but there are so many different regulator brands that physically being excited by sort of all the different brands is a little bit tricky. And Dive Right just sort of falls down into the sort of lower echelons of my sort of interest with regulators. But they have to meet all sorts of different sort of standards, all the EN250s, putting them on sort of ANSI test machines and like testing them out. So I'm sure they're perfectly fine, but there's just too many other alternates that sort of draw my attention. Dominic C asks, what about stiffness in jet fins? Should I go for soft or stiff blades for frog kicks? So this I actually missed out of the video, sort of all about sort of fins, just because I had it in my mind that they'd go in the apnea side of things, because freediving fins, it's kind of all about the stiffness, as it were. But of course we do get that in scuba diving as well. So you do get sort of different fins, mainly vented fins. You do get a few channel fins like the Cressy Thor, I believe. They do one version which is a bit stiffer, but I think that's only for professionals. But like the Apex RK3, you get the HD version, which is a little bit stiffer. The X Deep, the X something one, whatever they called it, that has 3 different stiffnesses. So stiffness is basically, yeah, how stiff it is. Soft is good for just relaxed diving. If you're just kind of chilling out, you're not really doing anything. It doesn't use up too much energy from your legs, but you won't sort of get quite as fast sort of to move through the water. Medium is your good sort of middle ground, and then stiff, if you really do have to fight some currents, then it's great. Yeah, if you don't really have the legs for it, I'd kind of steer away from it. So yeah, medium tends to sort of be perfect for most people. If you really need that performance to really get somewhere, even with current, then go for a stiffer blade. If you just want something a bit more relaxing, then yeah, just a softer blade will do you fine. Alistair Wilson asks, what are you using in your backup mask to keep it from fogging up if you lose your primary underwater? So my one actually has a little film inside of it, and too much stuff. So I don't know if you can see that, but there's actually a little film on the inside, and this is, I can't remember the brand. I think it's just branded like anti-fog or no fog or something. It comes into the UK through Sunto, so anywhere that sells Sunto should be able to get hold of the, or is it Tusa? It could be a CPS product, I can't remember. I think it is now. So anywhere that sells Tusa or waterproof dive equipment should be able to get these in for you, and they're just like sort of plastic transfers that sit on the inside of the lens, and it sort of prevents it from fogging up. If I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't worry too much, mainly because if you lose your primary mask, then your backup has been exposed to the water for the entire dive, so it's nice and cool. Your face is now going to be nice and cool because it's been exposed to the water, so fogging up is less likely. It will still happen if you haven't prepared your mask though, so yeah, just prepare it as you would your primary mask. Do it sort of 4 or 5 times just to make sure there's nothing there, and then sort of once a season, sort of during the down period, yeah, just prepare it again, and touch wood, it should be fine. Chris O'Never asks, tried them before, but I'm definitely interested. I saw a video the other day where they were, as sellers of Sidemount gear, how twin sets make you unstable in the water whilst relaxed, which makes you prone to turtling due to the high centre of gravity. Is this accurate or blown out of proportion? A little bit. So with side mounts, your cylinders are kind of either side of you, so they act as like outliers, and you are quite stable in the water. Whereas with twins, of course, that's all kind of on your back, but you have the buoyancy right underneath them as well, which is also keeping you nice and stable. So it's a matter of, yeah, if you do like turn like shoulder down suddenly, it will kind of pull you back round, but it's not a matter of, if you're kind of just hovering there, that you're constantly fighting the twins to stay upright. I've never had that issue. They do sort of hold you fairly stable in the water, arguably more than just a single. I quite like the stability of a twin set. With side mounts, yeah, it's a bit more spread out, so you're much more stable, to the point where, oh, I can't remember who it was. I'll find the video and I'll link it. And yeah, he's on side mount, and he literally sort of tilts himself, and his setup just sort of brings him right back to trim, which is beautiful. But saying that, if you have say aluminium tanks and you breathe one of them down sort of all the way for whatever reason, the buoyancy will change so much in that one that your body position will change, whereas on twins they're both connected, so it won't change. There's so many different sort of factors that can affect it, but realistically it's not a big issue where I'm constantly rolling over and thinking, oh, I wish I'd gone side mount for this dive. It's not that much of an issue. Vicky Roman says, hey, hi, love your content, thank you. Any specific reason why you use a 90-degree angle on a regulator hose instead of a swivel? So yeah, there's one main reason. If I have them... so I have this 90-degree sort of fitting on my primary, and this just means that the hose doesn't come straight out of that fitting. It comes out at 90 degrees, so that when it's actually in my mouth, the hose route's straight back, because my hose naturally goes around the back of my neck. And the alternate for this is like a 2-part swivel, something like a Omni swivel, and yeah, they do have a greater range of motion, so your hose can route in at any angle. But something like an Omni swivel, there is a caveat in that you have to make sure that it's done up really well, because otherwise it's basically 2 hemispheres. And the way that they twist, it just means that those hoses can come in at any angle. But with anything that's 2 separate parts, there's a bolt going straight through the middle, and if you don't tighten that up in between dives, those 2 parts can unscrew themselves, and that's literally, your hose goes one way and your second stage goes the other. I've heard story of this happening under the water. I've seen it happen, not quite as dramatically as a full separation, but just a leak, and that led to the end of the dive. And yeah, it's just another failure point if you don't sort of tighten up that little grub screw. I believe they have improved the design. They did upgrade it a couple of years ago, but still it's that kind of, oh, I don't know if that's sort of tightened up for the dive. Whereas with this, you can't sort of tighten it. There are some swivels that are perfectly fine, the ones that are factory fitted, like the ones on some atomic regulators. They're more of a ball and a cap kind of joint, so they're not a full kind of swivel, but they do kind of move around, so they give you a bit of freedom of movement, and it takes a lot of effort to actually separate those two parts. The only downside is that you just can't swap that hose out. If you do, you can't fit any hose onto that. It kind of has to be a replacement hose exactly the same. So that's the only downside. But I like this because you can fit any hose onto it, and it does exactly what I need with the fewest failure points. DAP Media says, hi Mark, hi DAP Media, love your videos, thank you. As a new diver, I understand that you are telling and explaining. Yes. I have a question. Could you do a video on what the difference is between a safe second versus an octo? I see a lot of people using the long hose configuration, and all of a sudden you don't use an octo anymore. What's the difference, and what's better? Thanks so much. Greetings. So there's not a great deal of difference as far as hardware. It's more just kind of terminology. They're very much synonyms, so you can call it an octo, an octopus, a safe seconds, an alternate air source. It's basically a second stage. A lot of the time they'll be the same color. They'll just be a standard black instead of a bright yellow. That's just down to personal preference. But the way that I see it, an octo, an octopus, is one that sits on your hip, and that is what you donate. So your octo is there for your buddy, whereas for a long hose primary setup, I'll donate my primary and donate that to you, and then I will switch to my alternate air source. So it's really just what's the word, nomenclature. It's just sort of what we call things. As far as the actual kind of manner of long hose primary donate, it's just a different way of diving. You can have that short hose primary and then a long hose octo. That's the way that a lot of divers are taught, and it's perfectly fine. It's just in and out of air situation. I was teaching once, and I can't remember what we were doing. We must have been doing alternate air ascent, where my student was pretending to be out of air, so I donate my octo. She was breathing from that, and it was just on a standard 90 centimeter hose. I didn't think anything of it because that's what came with the second stage, and because I was teaching, I think I just kind of like turned to check on my dive master, and it kind of dislodged the second stage in my student's mouth, and that just made me think, oh, maybe I should get a longer hose. And then I looked into long hose, and that got me into a sort of long hose primary donate. So it's just that if you've got 2.1 meters of hose, you can really sort of pass it, and they can sort of do whatever they want. The main reason for 2.1 meters is so that if you're in a confined space like a cave or a wreck, you can both swim single file, and either the person at the front can breathe from the second gas, or vice versa. Because you've got 2 meters, you can breathe and swim single file to get out of that restriction. That's the main reason for it. But yeah, as far as sort of what you call it, I think everyone kind of knows what you mean. If you say an octo or an alternate air source, it's the same thing. It's a second stage. It's just sort of who is sort of being donated to, I guess. Flappy Snack Hazard, there's actually someone called Flappy Snack Hazard, says, I'm looking to buy a shearwater Perdix, and my local dive centre doesn't sell any shearwater products. Yeah, that's not unusual. The closest place that does sell the Perdix is over an hour away. Is it worth driving there to try it out and make sure I like it, as it's quite expensive? So for a lot of brands, it also makes a lot of sense to be a bit more exclusive. So they won't just sell to every single dealer under the sun, because if they do that, then their chances of somebody dropping their price, and then their sort of perceived value kind of drops. So they are going to have their sort of key dealers that they look after. Is it worth driving over an hour just to play with one? I wouldn't worry. I mean, Shearwater, they are lovely dive computers, I promise you that. And oh, I have one. And yeah, I wouldn't be adverse to just sort of ordering one online. I think, as one commenter said, in this modern age, you might as well just order it. If you don't get on with it, just send it back. The lovely thing about the Perdix is that it has those sort of two different modes. You have recreational mode, which I believe it starts in, and then you can set it to technical. So if you do sort of progress, it's a matter of you've grown up with it in like recreational mode, so it's a lot like sort of any other dive computer with big sort of colourful numbers. And then if you do want to move down into the sort of the technical realms, you've kind of got used to the user interface, you've got used to how it works, and the only thing that really changes is the display. It just shows a bit more information. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about just sort of ordering one online. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a Shearwater product back because someone didn't get on with it. Michael Townsend says, thank you for the videos, you are more than welcome. In terms of SPG clipped off onto the left hip D-ring, would you move or adjust this if you were carrying a sling tank on your left hand side also? I find myself a bit cluttered. I don't have air integration, hence I can't just rely on my dive computer, and prefer not to have my pony, a little 40 cubic feet, on the right for greater freedom on my doing side. Cheers. Yeah, so stage cylinders always on the left, my SPG also on the left. It can get crowded, but with sort of muscle memory and kind of feeling around, you can always feel sort of which bolt snap is which, and I usually have a certain amount of length of kind of leash on the end of a stage cylinder that you can kind of tell, and the bolt snap, it almost like pulls away from the D-ring, so you know, and it's quite taut because it's got like the weight of the cylinder on it, so you can say, oh no, that's not my SPG, move on to the next one, that's my SPG, and then you can sort of find it and put it back. Yeah, it's never really been an issue. I wouldn't mount a tank on the right hand side unless you were sort of side mount diving. I have done it across the chest once. That was a weird example. I was on a rebreather at a time. It's a Poseidon, and I was just like, oh, I just kind of wanted to sort of try something out, and it was weird. I'll never do that again. So yeah, sort of always on the left hand side, but no, I wouldn't move the SPG. I'm going to link a video which I think I sent to you anyway, to Inner Space Explorers, because they do some great work sort of in the water. They're all sort of technical divers, and they do a lot of work with stage tanks, and you can see them in the water, so it's really great to kind of see their setups. I'm going to link that up there. Erica Alanis asks, would this mask work for snorkeling? So we get this quite a lot. I say we, I don't work at Simply Scuba anymore, but you get this question a lot, sort of asking about scuba masks and whether it would work for snorkeling. So there's no difference between a snorkeling mask and a scuba diving mask. The only real difference is your budget, basically. So you get the really cheap masks that are you'll buy them at the seaside, and these will sort of have silica skirts, so it's that like harder alternative to silicone, and it's usually clear, it usually discolors, it turns that like nicotine brown really quickly. Don't even bother looking at those. And then once you start getting into like a certain price bracket, as soon as you start seeing silicone, then they're fine. Yeah, you can take them snorkeling, but you can also take them scuba diving as well. Of course, you can dive a snorkeling mask. There's no difference between a snorkeling mask and a scuba diving mask, it's the same thing. It's just your sort of your price range and the kind of features that you're looking for. This one, for example, this was on the Scuba Pro, the D mask, the new one, which has like tinted lenses. It has a UV filter like protection, so it's actually great for snorkeling. It's made for scuba diving, but those tinted lenses just mean that they're protecting your eyes when you're on the surface from UV rays. And if you're snorkeling on the surface, you get a lot of that like bouncing off of the sun off of the surface into your eyes, so your eyes are very exposed. So actually it's a great mask for snorkeling. It's expensive. It's not really where most sort of snorkelers sort of budgets end up, but yeah, if money's no object, then yeah, it'll be a lovely mask. But really there's no difference between a snorkeling mask and a scuba diving mask. It's the same thing. And that's it for the questions. There are a whole ton of questions, so yeah, as ever, if you do have any questions, pop them down in any of the videos. I do my best to get to all of them, but I can promise you that I don't get to all of them because you guys are amazing. Actually, a lot of you, I've got a few sort of loyal supporters, as it were, who are sort of answering questions for me, and yeah, they do get the answers right, so trust them, and yeah, talk amongst yourselves. If I do get to chime in, then perfect. If I don't, I apologise. As ever, thank you for watching, and safe diving.